Well, it's the age of the internet, and during the age of the internet, all your attention span are belong to us. And this is Bill Whittle with Steve Green and Scott Ott, and your right angle on the tendency of the world, I suppose, to have a shorter and shorter. I wonder what time the restaurant opens. Get it? So here's the thing, guys. I was in an Uber last night, and I got in the back of the car, and the driver was a young guy. And usually they have music on, but this guy was listening to some kind of a seminar. And it was a seminar about YouTube and monetizing YouTube. And I wanted to tell the guy, hey, man, drive me to San Diego. I need to hear this thing, and get something out of this. But what I was listening to just in the car was a very young person talking about monetization of videos, monetizing YouTube videos, and so on and so forth, back and forth, and what they're charging and so on. Very, very nuts and bolts, kind of really in the weeds details. And then this guy said something really remarkable. He said, and by the way, there's a misconception that I just want to clear up. If your video is interesting enough, and compelling enough, and you got enough stuff on there that really grabs people, you can do up to 4-minute videos. I've heard of people watching 4-minute videos all the way through. So it's not a question of you have to keep it shorter than that. And I thought, my first thought was, well, Scotty, I'll tell you what my first thought was. My first thought was to say to this guy, not you idiot, was to say, doesn't that scare you a little? I mean, doesn't it scare you a little? Because if a 4-minute attention span is the upper limit, is it possible to learn how to be a brain surgeon or an engineer? I'm not saying it's possible to do in 4 minutes, but do you think it's possible to do in 4-minute bites?
It occurs to me that I believe it was in the 1970s that we had the first of what I recall as the television miniseries. And it was like a 6-night event, where every night they were going to have this
Roots.
long episode of Roots. Yeah, Alex Haley's then novel brought to television. If today they made Roots for the first time, I believe it would be an animated GIF. I think that's... I mean, it would just kind of, it would be, I found you, Kunta Kinte. And that would be it,
Page of animated GIFs, exactly.
I think that there's truth in this, that, there are a lot of people who seem to be flitting from one thing to the next. I mean, this generation is nothing if not a bunch of honeybees who are moving from one stamen to the next, just getting a little bit and getting a little bit and getting a little bit of nectar here, and then taking off. On the other hand, I think that you've also seen in this generation, and by generation I don't mean an age group necessarily, I mean just kind of the people who are alive at this time, spectacular accomplishments that require endless hours of almost unendurable concentration and focus and determination and willingness to set aside other concerns in order to accomplish a particular purpose. And perhaps that's the key difference. Because if you're just watching videos to amuse yourself, if you're just scrolling through your Instagram stream just for something to do, then anything that drags on longer than 30 seconds seems tedious to you. But when you have a purpose in life, when there's something you're determined to do, you can get lost in that task for hours on end and feel like it was but a moment. And I find this same pattern in my own life. There are some things that I'll hop from one thing to another very rapidly, and then next thing you know, I'm engaged in something, and I look up and I was like, wow, 5 hours went by. Where did that go? And I had no idea because I was so wrapped up in it. And I think people are still people, and that's the way they behave. Now, can we educate a generation like that? Yes, but you have to engage them in the process. You can't just show them. You've got to draw them in. You've got to get them solving problems. You've got to give them a challenge that's worthy of their time and attention.
Yeah, I refer to it as you're going to have to put the dog pill in a dog treat, and you just stuff the pill in the middle of the nice chewy treat and let the dog wolf it down without even knowing.
I would take that to another level. I'd say, okay, go ahead and put the dog pill in a treat if you want to, but then hide the pill.
Exactly. Steve, one of the things that helps to develop a long attention span is not something intellectually. Nobody, I should sit down and read this because I need a longer attention span. But here's what's interesting and different about the world that's coming on us now with YouTube. It's virtually all I watch is YouTube. It's almost, in fact, that is all I watch. I don't watch. I just watch individual produced content. But here's the problem. If you're watching something on YouTube, when it starts to slow down, you simply find something else to look at. Even in something that's visual, forget books, but even in movies, even in an action movie, you have to slow things down after a big action scene to give people enough time to emotionally breathe and decompress so that when you send them to the next dramatic point or action point, they'll enjoy it more. And if you try to do that on the internet, you'll just find people just fast forwarding. In video games, there are no cool down periods. Everybody runs from point A to point B. Steven Spielberg movie came out earlier.
Ready Player One.
Ready Player One. Right.
I could not sit through that movie. Talk about short attention span.
So you see all these avatars, right, in this incredible world, and it's really interesting and cool. And I said, this isn't real because everybody's walking everywhere. Nobody has time to walk. You will run at full speed to the limit of your endurance to get through this, to get to the action. So dramatically, isn't that kind of stealing, I think, from a generation, stealing from them the ability to have this payoff, the delayed gratification, the sense of emotional reward you get dramatically after watching people go through things you don't want them to go through? Just to wrap this up for you, Stephen, because I think it's a really interesting topic. I remember many years ago when I was in college in 1980, 81, something like that. And they were just beginning to talk about digital actors. And I had a theater professor who I admired very much who said that pretty soon there won't be any writers because the audience would make the selections of how they want the characters to go. And I said, no, Dr. Shelton, you're absolutely wrong about that. If the audience decided how the movie would go on a button-by-button basis. Do I go inside the room? Do I go down the hall? If the audience were to decide that in real time, you would produce the most boring story in the history of the world because nothing bad would ever happen to the people that you like and nothing good would ever happen to the people that you don't like. And the entire idea of dramatic tension and overcoming odds and all of that just goes away when you've got a 4-minute attention span.
Wow. You just made me think about something. This is probably why the millennials are having so few babies. It took me, I think, 17 minutes and 22 seconds to unclasp a bra for the first time. And kids these days just don't have that kind of attention
They don't have the motor skills.
They're going to give up after the first 3 minutes. And there you go.
Got to know how to pull
a
a spark plug in order to have that kind of dexterity.
Yeah, and kids aren't learning these skills anymore. So there's that. You talk about delayed gratification and the audience. My thoughts wandered, as they almost always do, to Star Wars. And inarguably, the best movie of the original trilogy was The Empire Strikes Back. And that ended on a real down note. Luke's just gotten the worst news in the world right after getting his hand cut off. Han, the coolest guy in the galaxy, is now encased in carbonite in the clutches of a vile gangster. And then to top things off, we had to wait 3 years to find out what happens next.
We did.
And boy, did we wait. In the pre-internet days, you could really only talk about this kind of stuff with your friends, but you did, and it built up the tension, and it built up the excitement, and the payoff, Ewoks aside, was pretty phenomenal, and that 3-year wait helped to make that. Although I can't help thinking that maybe this isn't a self-correcting problem. Because if you've got a generation with a higher percentage of people who just don't know how to function over a longer term, you're going to find people who look at that as an opportunity. I look at my just turned 13-year-old son, and you should hear the things he says about millennials. That kid's just mean to the generation older than he is. And I'm thinking, you know what? I kind of don't want the millennials to sort out their stuff, because every millennial who's kind of fallen into this short attention span, no baby having trap is opening up an opportunity for my two kids, and I'm not sure I have a problem with that.
Bill, can I add that Steve it just occurred to me, Steve, we have a bunch of people out there who are spending incredible hours of focused attention trying to hone things down to 3 minutes so people with no attention span can be entertained
Yes.
by them.
That is a huge opportunity, and people are taking advantage of it. So every time a door closes, a window opens, or what's the expression? What were we talking about?
Yeah. Well, folks, Scott pointed out the first thing that needs to be said about this, and that is that it is, in fact, millennials that are doing most of the engineering on amazing programs like SpaceX. It's basically millennials that built the rockets that could come back down and land on the landing pad simultaneously. And to say that no millennials have an attention span longer than 4 seconds minutes is certainly not what I'm trying to suggest at all. But I am saying that as a cultural cohort, as a group, their attention span is clearly falling, and not only are they are not only aware of it, they don't seem to see it as a problem. Even in video consumption of things like TV shows, binge watching now is the thing to do. If you want to see The Walking Dead, you wait till the season's over, then you watch an episode, and it's like, oh God, I got to watch another one. You don't have to wait at all. You don't wait for anything, and it's the wait that creates the anticipation. The anticipation creates the emotional payoff. So that aspect of it, I'm concerned about. But the real issue that really interests me is this. There was a science fiction book that was a supplement to the Aliens movie. I'll never forget this. I just wanted to credit the guy, whoever it was. And in this little chapter, they were talking about the new weapons that were coming online with the Colonial Marines. And this guy said, I have no doubt that there was a time when some flinty Israelite sergeant was outside the walls of Jericho talking about these newfangled trumpets and how we used to have to use ladders and rocks to knock down walls. So, there is always a tendency for people to look on new things and to say, this is nowhere near as good as things were when in fact, I am the pinnacle of human history. Exactly when I was raised is the exact moment of maximum awesomeness. No. So, there's no question that young people can multitask information on a level that I simply can't. They can have 3 or 4 devices going and be able to parse this information. Andrew Breitbart was the only person I ever knew who could drink out of 4 fire hoses at the same time. I mean, he's just astonishing how much information he could sift through. So I'm willing to admit that there might in fact be ways for people to learn how to do the really difficult things like brain surgery and engineering and so on. I just, for the life of me, cannot imagine how. I cannot imagine how. The thing about reading is that when you come to something that interests you, you can stop and you can think about it and you can develop an opinion about things. And one of the reasons you can stop and think is because not only are there not 500,000 other books within reach, it's also a question of I can fast forward, through this book and it's still going to be the same book. It forces you to appreciate things. It forces you to think about things. And when I say forces, I mean it forces. It's a lot tougher to sit and read a novel than it is to watch an action movie, unless you do it enough. In which case, after you do it enough, you realize that the movies can't really compare to what you can get out of a really terrific book. That reading Lord of the Rings, for example, on some level is a much, much deeper experience than just the sheer visual wonder of watching it. I think it as a trilogy, I think it's the best movie ever made. So I don't mean to be bagging on the millennials again about this. It's just that I don't understand it. And it's not that I don't understand the internet, and it's not that I don't understand YouTube. I understand these things all too well. I don't know how you run an information age society built by people whose upper limit for attention is 4 minutes. But just because I don't know how it's going to be done doesn't mean it can't be done. It's just I don't, for the life of me, know how to do it. And I think on some level, once again, this generation has been ripped off, not by themselves. They didn't educate themselves. They just they've never been forced, essentially, to do the mental weightlifting necessary to be able to wait for the payoff and to understand the value of that delayed gratification. So I'd love to be proven wrong on this one. I won't be, but I'd love to be. And so, well, look at that. What we have just. We've at least done 5 times the attention span of the people that need to see this. 5 times the maximum attention span, so we don't have to worry too much about millennials on the comment section.
We're going to release this as a 6-night YouTube event.
It should be a 60 episode 10-second event, but nevertheless, we don't have to worry about comments from millennials because they tuned out of this thing right after. Hi, everybody. I'm Bill Whittle. So thanks for joining us, the rest of you geezers out there who have stuck with us for the entire 16 minutes of this little dog and pony show. And thanks again to the members for making it possible. And we will see you next week right here on Right Angle.